Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a job for me.
Where's the goodies?
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
You want to be the manager of the baseball team?
Yes.
You know the guys' names?
Well, I should.
Well, you tell me the guys' names on the baseball team.
I say, who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
You ain't saying nothing to me yet. Go ahead and tell me.
I'm telling him.
You ain't
Look.
said nothing yet. Go ahead and tell me.
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know is on third.
You know the guys' names on the baseball team?
Yes.
Well, go ahead. Who's on first?
Yes.
I mean the guy's name.
Who?
The guy playing first.
Who?
The guy playing first base.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first?
What are you asking me for? I don't know.
That's the classic Abbott Costello. They'll be playing old versions of Everything Old is New Again 60, 70 years from now to start another show, a different radio show, a different incarnation, and they'll be listening to us and laughing as much as we laugh at Abbott Costello now.
And you should listen to our redo of that famous sketch Doug and I did. Wasn't that? It was, some said, better than the original.
Correct. It was actually the
wait, that's a typo. None said it was better. Right, sorry.
Well, this is Douglas Viviani together with Iron Man himself, David Cohen, our own Iron Man. And why do I call you Iron Man? Whose nickname was that?
Well, it was Lou Gehrig's.
Correct.
He played in 3,754 consecutive games. I'm making that number up, but he played in a lot of consecutive games. They called him the Iron Man because today we're going to be talking about...
Well, we're talking about the days of summer. And we talk about the days of summer because we're in the middle of the summer. We talk about the boys of summer. We talk about the boys of summer. We're talking about baseball, correct?
Correct.
Am I wrong? So in true Everything Old is New Again style, we're going to pose the question, if you could travel back in time and visit any team or player that you've not seen, you're not going to go back and see somebody you've seen already in your lifetime, who would it be? Also, we're going to have a baseball legend visit with us.
Yes.
In our third section of the show, so
right here in the
stay tuned
studio
for that. Exact. Also, we're going to examine players today and the game today, and does it live up to the players of the past? Are the players today better or worse? But I think we want to really look at this through the prism of the past to understand where we're going to, and I think the people that are in charge of baseball now should listen to this show, or at the very least look at the past. They've not been looking at the past and the success of baseball in the past and why it's been successful, and that's why they're losing their way. That's just my thought. What do you think?
That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about your thought, because there's definitely been a loss of interest in baseball.
Absolutely.
No,
we're going to start that, but we can't talk about that till we actually dive into some of the history. And one of the most, if I had to go back in time, one of the most iconic things, one of them that has ever happened in baseball was in the 1929 World Series. Babe Ruth took some time to do something. I don't know if you remember this story, but I'll let him tell it to you himself. The Babe on Everything Old is New Again.
Forget it was a tough series. Both clubs riding each other, doing everything to get each other's goat. Well, at this one particular time when I went to bat, well, I stepped out of the box, and by that time they were over there going crazy. Well, I looked down at center field and I pointed. I said, I'm going to hit the next pitch ball right past the flagpole. Well, good Lord, must have been with me.
And there it goes. In the World Series, he allegedly pointed to center field and hit the home run on the next pitch. What did you think of that?
Well, there's some film about they found archival film about allegedly that incident, and you can sort of see him point. It looked like he was sort of angry, but he was pointing somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like...
if it didn't happen, it's darn close. I mean, he pointed.
Yeah.
No, he was pointing to the center field. Now, was he pointing to the center fielder? It makes no sense to do that, but he was pointing in that direction.
Yes. And then you see him hit a home run.
Yep.
So there's probably a lot of truth to it.
Which is amazing. So to me, like, if you think about that, a player today doing that, I mean, these guys celebrate afterwards, and they're dancing, and they're watching the ball fly over the fence and all that, and that's fine and dandy. This is a guy that hit more home runs than other teams.
Yes.
So think about teams now they're usually hitting about 300, 250 home runs, right? Less, all right. So let's say 200. You look at the faces I'm getting. But we have to look that up in the interim.
Yeah. Well, let's just pick it. All right, 200. Let's say 200.
And Babe
right?
Ruth is hitting or a player is hitting 250 himself.
Exactly.
That's what that's like.
Yep.
That's why he was such a phenom. Before that, there was Home Run Baker for the Philadelphia A's. He hit like 8 or 9 a season, and he was called Home Run Baker. You ever hear this guy?
Poor use of a moniker. Yes, definitely.
All right, I've got a little clip here from Leo DeRocher. Remember him? If you remember him, he was a manager, a player in the 30s on the Gas House Gang for St. Louis in the Depression, and that was a team I wouldn't mind seeing. We'll talk about that. There's also, he was a manager of the Dodgers, of the Giants, of the Houston Astros.
Why would you want to see Leo DeRocher?
No, I wouldn't want to see him. I want to hear what he has to say about a player I would like to hear.
Ty Cobb, I had one run-in with him at the end of his career. In 29, he was on first base. Speaker hit the ball up through the middle. I knocked the ball down. Cobb had to go around me, and he tried to go to third, and I threw him out, and he said, "Next time you get in my way, I'll step right in your face, you fresh busher." That's the only run-in I ever had with him. But I'm glad I didn't play during his era. I mean, they tell me he was a pretty rough man.
Rough man, using that language of fresh pusher.
What's a fresh busher?
It's like a bush league, guy.
Oh, fresh busher?
Like you're fresh out of the bush leagues.
You sure he didn't say something different? It could be, and Leo DeRocher, I'm sure, didn't want to say it.
But Cobb was the son of a gun. He was a precursor to if you've ever seen In My World, Pete Rose, but he was more than that. He was he hit 350, 380 all the time. He hated the home run ball. It was before the home run ball era. He came up against Babe Ruth. He did play against Babe Ruth, but he did not like that kind of ball. He was more of the small ball kind of a player, but he could do it. He could back it up. He hit doubles, triples like crazy. He stole like crazy. He played for 20 years plus and was an
so
icon.
Here's the thing. Would you want to see him play, or would you want to like hang out with him?
I
Sounds
want
like
to
more like
see
you
him
want to
play.
hang out with him.
I would not want to hang out with this guy. He is an absolute boob. He wasn't such a nice guy, although financially he invested his money well and became very rich. But that doesn't mean that he was a nice man. He was not a nice guy. But, sometimes nice guys finish last, and that's where Leo DeRocher got his saying from, looking at Ty Cobb and saying nice guys finish last, because Cobb was not a nice guy.
Huh. How do you like that?
And of course, he knew him. So there's one. I'm going to throw another at you. You probably don't think of this guy when you think about best of all time.
Dizzy Dean, one of the greats of all time. You dig in on him, like they do at home plate and make a hole. He used to fold his arms and watch you. And then when you got through, he'd say, "You comfortable? Get a shovel and send for the groundkeeper, because I'm going to bury you right there." And the first one was right at your head. Down you went. And then you stepped in there lightly. He said, "That's better."
He reminds me of a mix between Bob Gibson, who you always hear the stories and have seen, would not put up with any kind of nonsense in a batter's box. He'd be like, "Get in the box, and we're playing the game. Stop getting out and playing with your game, your gloves, and all this other nonsense."
And those were the days when the pitchers batted. So, whatever you said or did could come back to haunt you. So these guys were, pretty bold.
Exactly. Further, Dizzy Dean, he won 35 games and then 28 the next year, but then had a toe injury that took him out of the game. So he reminds me of a Mark Fidrich type, and also a Doc Gooden, although Doc Gooden was drug-related. Still, he had that kind of a start to his career where he was tremendously successful, ERAs in the 2s and 1s for 4 or 5 years, and then had this happen to him where he hurt his toe and he was never the same.
You gotta love the nicknames. Dizzy Dean, now, wasn't his brother Daffy Dean?
Yes,
Dizzy and Daffy.
Exactly.
I don't think that's what the parents called him, but that's how they became known.
They pitched on the same team, St. Louis Cardinals. Here's another one. A player that I would have seen, but
Willie Mays.
Willie Mays, best ball player I've ever seen in my life.
How about that? That's all he has to say.
A lot of people say that, yep.
And I saw him towards the end. My grandfather said that he was the best player he ever saw in his life. My grandfather was born in 1901, so he saw Ruth and Gehrig and all of them. And he was like, no, because he could run more, he could catch more.
He was what they call now a five-tool player.
Exactly. And Willie Mays, if you remember, was played for Leo DeRocher for the Giants. I believe his first year was early 50s. I don't know if it was 54 or not, but and he had a bad start to his career and was striking out, not hitting well. And DeRocher pulled him aside and said, "Listen, Willie," and Willie Mays was crying and wanted to be sent down to the minors. He said, "Listen, you're my center fielder. That's it. You're the guy. I'm not pulling you out of the lineup. I'm not, having problems with you. I know you're going to be successful. Get in there and do your thing." And Mays will say that all the time. The rest is history. That was his career turning point because of Leo DeRocher. Leo the Lip, they called him. You remember that?
Yeah.
So there's a few of mine that I would go back and
remember
and look at,
but there's also the iconic footage of Willie Mays making that over-the-shoulder catch and then having the presence of mind to turn around and throw a guy out, I believe, trying to advance on the hit.
1954 World Series, exactly.
Incredible.
And
yeah, just Google it if you haven't seen it, even by today's standards.
And look at his stats. I mean, we're not talking about any steroids or anything. This guy had stats out the wazoo, and he was not a compiler. He had great stats year in and year out.
Yep.
All right. All right. We'll go out a little song with, we're in New York, so we'll have a little bit more of a bend towards the New York players, and of course Mickey Mantle. I sort of saw at the end of his career. Did you kind of remember him?
I remember him.
He
I'm
did
sure
go
I did,
till 71, so we were 8, 9, 10. You might be able to have seen him.
I don't have any memories of seeing him, unfortunately.
And I do, and it wasn't great, but he was a hero back then.
Well, you're older than I am.
There you go. A couple of months.
I love Mickey.
Mickey who?
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
On the corner, the national pastime went on trial. We're talking baseball. Klazuski, Campanella, talking baseball. The man and Bobby Fella, the Scooter, the Barber, and the Nuke. They knew them all from Boston to Dubuque. Especially Willie, Mickey, and the Duke.
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. We're talking old-time baseball. It just comes across my, when I hear that song, if I lived in Iowa, let's say, or some other states, it's an odd thing that, especially a lot of these dynasties, we're going to talk about baseball dynasties now, that if you wanted to go travel in time, or you could travel in time, what season or what dynasty team would you want to see that you've never seen, you couldn't see live? It's very provincial back in the 50s and 40s, and a lot of these dynasties are East Coast teams, and I mean the more recent ones, we could say the Giants and the A's in the 70s, and the Giants recently are West Coast and all of that, but so a lot of it, we can't help it. It's going to be focused on New York and the East Coast, right?
Yeah,
teams?
I mean, that's where baseball was located, right? I mean, you had the Midwest, but that's about as far west as you went.
And certainly the St. Louis Cardinals and the Gas House Gang, and they had some dynasties too, so let's not forget them.
Right.
But a lot of the big names, remember, I mean, baseball in those days, that was where it was played, so we have no choice. That's where it was.
It's true.
And again, there's new dynasties developing all the time, but let's go back in time with Everything Old is New Again and see what we would want to see. What team would we want to see back in time if we could go back in time? To me, my first selection is very obvious, is the 1926-28 Yankees, where, of course, you got Gehrig and Lazari, and you've got Babe Ruth. You've got Earl Combs as center fielder. You've got Wilcie Moore. I mean, you've got some tremendous ball players that Bill Dickey put together some tremendous run here. And I don't know if you agree with me on that, but that just to see Gehrig and Ruth together for a season had to be a kick. Just an amazing time in baseball.
Right, and it was a high point in popularity for baseball at that point as well. So you're seeing these amazing, iconic players, and you got to think, I mean, my gosh, that was 80 years ago now, and just seeing just how the game was played has got to be so different from the way it is now. And to see how those performers played that game, I think would be really interesting to see.
Yeah. So, and they were a powerhouse, and everyone talked about them. And of course, everyone talks about the 1927 Yankees. If you're a baseball fan, is
arguably
the best team
greatest
of all time,
team ever, right?
Which we could argue is possible. But
right.
I know David has one of. Other than that, I mean, I would love to sit in the stands to watch that team. You would like to listen to this. I would say watch this team, and I'll play it first.
Joe DiMaggio is really a picture up there at home plate. Yes, he's really something. 0-2 the count. 2 men out and nobody on. It's a long drive going high up over the left field pavilion, and it's a home run for Joe DiMaggio. That ball was almost over the roof out in left field.
There you go. Joe DiMaggio's 1937 World Series home run, but there was a dynasty in the 30s. David, talk about that dynasty. Amazing.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was really part of two, you could arguably say two different Yankee dynasty eras that DiMaggio was part of. So that was, I guess, the first one, quote-unquote. So from 1936 to 1939, they won 4 consecutive World Series. Granted, it was easier back then. You only had to finish first, and then there was only one postseason round, which was the World Series. But still, they're pretty impressive. Not only did they win 36, 37, 38, 39, they skipped every other year, but they won again in 41 and in 1943. And, you know, with DiMaggio, I'd like to go back and see that team to see him in his prime. And for this reason only, because ever since, and you probably agree with me here, growing up, he was before our time, but all we ever heard about growing up in New York was, oh, if you would only have seen Joe DiMaggio play.
And I analogize him, and this is not going to work 100%, but I analogize him to a Derek Jeter in that he didn't have the best statistics. Again, he was a right-handed hitter in a ballpark that is a lot bigger than it is now, had a cavernous center field, a very far left field porch, or whatever you say, fences. So to hit home runs there was not easy for a right-hander, and he still averaged, 30-something home runs a year, but he wasn't, 40s, 50s, and 60s to make it outstanding. Didn't lead the league all the time in all the stats, but they did nothing but win.
Right.
And it's sort of Jeter-esque. I mean, it's not fair because DiMaggio was better than Jeter, but I think especially stats-wise, but the winning attitude-wise, the man was never on a losing team. And think about it. I just want to stop you for a minute because let's look at it. 36, 37, 38, 39. And by the way, he was with Lou Gehrig.
I was going to mention that. Right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That team, and to see Gehrig and DiMaggio together, wow!
After seeing Ruth and Gehrig together, what a career Gehrig had! I mean, what's amazing. By the way, hit home runs like crazy. Gehrig always came into second to either DiMaggio or Ruth.
It's true.
Most of the time, anyway. And by the way, in 42, that run you had from 36 to 43. Which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They came in or lost the World Series in 42 to the St. Louis Cardinals, so they were there. So 7 out of 8 years they were in the World Series in a row.
It's just amazing.
It's unreal. So yeah, but the other thing to me is those teams. If you look at them, there's not a lot of other stars on those teams besides the 2 that we mentioned. You had Red Rolfe, as a pitcher. You had Bill Dickey, who was big. But other than that, maybe Joe Gordon. Who else did you have on those
Red
teams?
Ruffing was a top pitcher on those teams in the 30s.
But if you look at, go back in time, you're not going to recognize, look at the lineups. You will not recognize most of the players in the lineup.
That's true.
And he still won like crazy.
And part of it is because, we didn't know those players. So, I mean, somebody 80 years from now could look back at the Houston Astros lineup and not,
maybe so.
Maybe they'll remember Altuve, but beyond that, like how did they win? We don't know.
True, but a lot of these teams you do. It's true, but a lot of these, like the 27 Yankees, still have iconic players and whatever it might be. It's just interesting to see that end of it. How about we take a look at the 50s Yankees?
Winner of baseball's triple batting crown. He won the American League batting title, led in runs batted in, and walloped a total of 52 home runs. Magley gets 1 strike on Mantle, and there it goes over the right field fence across Bedford Avenue and deep into a parking lot. Slaughter scores ahead of Mantle, and the Yankees have a quick 2-0 lead.
All right, so there's a
that had to have been the opposing team's announcer. Right? It was just like someone was walking up to the plate, and there it goes on to Bedford Avenue.
Now talk about those teams. So that was the. There was a time. I'm going to go this for you, just to make it simple. There were 5 years in a row, 49 to 53, that Yankee team
5 years in a row.
So who was on that team? Why are you a big fan of that team?
Well, because Mantle was definitely part of it. His early years, Casey Stengel. But the other thing about that consecutive win, you talk about players that you don't really remember that don't stand out, but they had one of the top pitching staffs in baseball, and they're guys that don't, when you think back, don't immediately jump to the front of your mind. But Vic Raschi, Allie Reynolds, Eddie Lopat, they were dominant back then, and they were a big reason why the Yankees won every year.
So you would want to see this team for what reason? Which player?
Because
what players?
For DiMaggio and for Mantle.
There's the transfer from DiMaggio to Mantle.
Right.
To Mantle,
and
in the middle of that.
Exactly. And and I'd like to see them together, right? I forget what years they were together, but also how dominant I think they were back then. That was
well, again, go from 49 to 59. Okay, that's 10 years,
right?
Or 49 to
53 is 5.
Well, let's go 49 to 58, just for the heck of it. There's 5, 6, 7 out of those 9 years they won.
It's crazy.
55, they lost to the Brooklyn Dodgers.
The only year they lost to the Brooklyn Dodgers.
And 57, they lost to the Milwaukee Braves. So they were in the World Series 9 years in a row. They were in the World Series 9 years in a row.
But again, just to caveat that, it was easier to make it to the World Series back then because you just had to finish first place out of a division of how many teams? Maybe 10? 8,
yeah.
You know, so, okay.
I have to mention real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt because we're running out of time. I have to mention I agree with you, but Philadelphia Athletics, 1929 to 31, they had Jimmy Fox, Al Simmons, Lefty Grove. That was a time frame. They won 2 years after for 3 years in a row. They won 2 out of those 3 years. They won the World Series under Connie Mack's tutelage and beat those Yankee juggernauts.
That's pretty amazing.
Think about that.
Yep. And that's not really mentioned much at all in baseball history.
Yeah, I think you really got to look at that.
I think there's a movie there. I think there is. Let's do a movie on them.
I like it. The Philadelphia Athletics.
Nobody knows the story.
Underrated. What would you say? Underrated franchise dynasty of all time, except for maybe, I don't know. Do you remember the Reds? It's sort of right there where we don't remember.
And I looked back at Carlton Field because I said, man, isn't this the most exciting game you ever played in? I was telling the truth. I was having fun. I mean, win, lose, or draw, man, I was happy to play in this game. I mean, let me tell you something, man. I played 3,500 games, and that's the most exciting game I ever played in.
Pete Rose, talk about the 75 World Series against the Boston Red Sox.
We were really young back then, but I can tell you how important and how dominant the Cincinnati Reds were, being kids in New York. Other than naming every player in the Yankees, the only other team we could name every player on the team was the Cincinnati Reds because that's how good and dominant they were.
Dave Concepcion, Tony Perez, Johnny Bench, Ken Griffey, Cesar Geronimo. I mean, it goes on and on.
They were household names.
Morgan and Rose and George Foster. I mean, it was unbelievable. All right, we'll be back right after this on Everything Old is New Again. And continue. We may have a little special guest after this.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New Again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
There's the windup. Here's the pitch. It's a slow curve low, and the Babe swings. It's a long one going out toward right center. Stengler's backing up against the wall. He can't get it. It's in there. Another home run for the Bambino. So the Babe hits his second homer of the day.
Well, that's baseball, and it's my game. You know, you take your worries to the park and you leave them there. You yell like crazy for your guys. Good for your lungs. Gives you a lift and nobody calls the cops. Pretty girls, lots of them. And a hot dog at the game beats roast beef at the Ritz.
There we go. There's a little piece of it, huh? If you go back in time, there are two icons that you'd want to see or meet. Babe Ruth hitting those home runs. The Bambino. Did you hear that announcer? He called him the Bambino.
Bambino.
That was legitimate radio broadcast of Babe Ruth hitting a home run. Pretty cool. Because you always think Bambino and you think of Sandlot and different movies, and you don't really think that people actually called him that. Does that make sense?
At the time, it sounded more like a retrospective.
Right,
approach,
the great Bambino. Think of the iconic relationship baseball had with America to have the number one box office attraction, Humphrey Bogart doing basically a promo for baseball.
Yeah,
and he meant it. He was at the ballpark all the time.
Right, there for the chicks apparently.
Yeah. Pretty girls, lots of them.
Pretty girls and lots of them.
All right, so now, going back in time, if we had to go back in time here and Everything Old is New Again, we know we have that ability where we've used it before. We've gone back and we've had Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes participate on our show from the Victorian era. And we're not going to do that now, but I want to see, can we possibly now visit with Babe Ruth himself on Everything Old is New Again and see what he feels about the developments of baseball? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I have a bunch of questions.
You do?
I'm all ready for the Bambino if he would come into the studio. If you would turn it over to me, I would be happy to interview him.
All right, so let's do that. We're going to first, let's talk about his records being broken and play a clip or two from that, and then we'll progress from there.
He looks pretty anxious to get in here, so yeah, let's do that.
So let's use the analogy we have to bring him in.
A crumbling of paper.
Hey, well, I tell you, what's this all about?
Thank you for joining us. Very nice of you to be here.
Where am I? What is it? Radio still? Say, what is this here?
Well, it's a radio program we're doing. It's called Everything Old is New Again, and we're taking a look back at old-time baseball versus baseball today. And what better guest to have to talk to about that than you, arguably the greatest baseball player of all time. And
Well,
thank you for joining us.
glad to be here. I'll tell you, I love it. I got to tell you, ask you one question. Where am I? What time frame is this?
Well, this is 2018.
Whoa!
Babe. Yeah. So this is way after your playing
You picked me
days.
right out of my days here. The Red Sox, then with the Yankees, we had a nice going.
About 100 years ago. That's right.
Oh, boy, you fellas are something else here. Okay, listen, well, what would you like to ask me?
Well, a lot has changed about the game, but a lot hasn't. It's pretty much the same game it was when you were playing, for the most part, babe.
How are my records doing? My record's still going strong at a 60 home runs season?
Well, let's go through that. So, we wanted to let you down gently and kind of show you how some of your records, some of them have been broken.
Say.
So the 60 home runs in a season, unfortunately, is no longer a record.
Was it somebody at least on the with their end of pinstripes?
Yes, it was a Yankee who played after you did. It was the year 1961, and let's listen to it.
Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Holy cow! What's the matter? Holy cow! What a shot! One of the greatest sights I've ever seen here at Yankee Stadium.
Now, what is that? You got a recording? It sounds like it's...
it was a broadcaster by the name of Phil Rizzuto, also a former Yankee and now a Hall of Famer, who broadcasts that home run hit by a guy named Roger Maris. Roger Maris was with the Yankees for a few years. Now, babe, I have to tell you that Roger Maris went into the record books with a little asterisk next to the 61 because baseball extended its number of games it played during the regular season after you were gone.
154 for us.
Right. And when Roger Maris hit that 61st home run, it was in game 162. And that's why the
162 or 161?
Well, there are 162 games in the season.
I see. Okay.
So they put the asterisk in the book, and it's very controversial because they feel that Maris had more of a chance to hit the 61 than you did.
What Maris do to celebrate? I bet you he filled that tub with ice and had some champagne, and he had the gals over for a nice time at the hotel across the street from Yankee Stadium. He must have had a nice grand old time for himself.
His personality was a little different than yours, babe. He was more of an introvert, so I don't know if he celebrated.
How about?
as much.
I bet you he took a nice curtain call there for himself, all by himself.
He wasn't very media savvy like you were, babe.
How about the kids? He signed an autograph or two for the kids?
Nobody really liked him. No.
Oh, boy.
So, so in my mind, and I think in a lot of players' minds, up until that point, you held that record. But there was another record, I'm sorry to say, that was also broken. That was your career home run record.
714, huh?
Yeah.
It's gone? All right.
Listen to the clip of the person who broke
One
that.
ball and no strikes. Aaron waiting. The outfield deep and straight away. Fastball is a high drive into deep left center field. Buckner goes back to the fence. It is gone. What a marvelous moment for the country and the world. A black man is getting a standing ovation in the Deep South for breaking a record of an all-time baseball idol. And it is a great moment for all of us, and particularly for Henry Aaron.
That sounds like a black man. I'd like to see black men were playing baseball then, huh?
That's right. That was a development that started in the 40s with the first African-American player, Jackie Robinson. By the way, babe, because of Jackie, every number 42 is now retired in baseball.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it.
Yeah. So Hank Aaron,
those fellas can really play. I'm telling you, I played against Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige back in the day on the pond. Yeah, I'm telling you, these guys, they could play.
Now, did you feel back then that they should have been part of the game?
No question about it. No question about it. But there's a lot of prejudice going on back then, and I'll tell you, people didn't like the antics that I had. I faced a little something on the road. I can only imagine. I had faced a very, very, very small bit of prejudice, if you will. These fellas had to deal with it every time they went to a different field, a different ballpark, a different city. They had to secure different facilities where to stay. They had black only facilities to stay. It was a horrible situation. situation. So glad to see that this Hank Aaron is his name.
That's right.
I'm glad to see he was able to bring and I was glad that I'm a little small part of being able to bring together America a little bit there on this, as this announcer was talking about, to celebrate beating my records. I understand that. I'm happy for that. Records are made to be broken. Let's face it.
Now, speaking of that, there was a lot of controversy that happened in baseball many years after that, in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, when or I should say Roger Maris's single-season home run record was broken. And let's hear a clip of that.
So winds and fires. Big Mac, swing, and a shot into the corner. It might make it. There it is, 62, folks. It just got over the left field wall in the corner. And we have a new home run champion.
All right, so that's this. What's this? Mac. What's the name?
That's Mark McGwire. So he hit 62, but he continued after that, and there was a lot of controversy around that. And I guess you don't know what happened.
I don't know, but you maybe could tell me after you told me the other record was broken too. Is Hank Aaron's record broken?
Yeah, unfortunately, Hank Aaron's career home run record that surpassed yours was also broken, and by this player. Let's listen to this.
So winds and fires. Big Mac, swing, and a shot into the corner. It might make it. There it is, 62, folks. It just got over the left field wall in the corner. And we have a new home run champion.
All right, so there's a problem with both of these fellas. What's up?
The problem was that during this era, they were using what was known as performance-enhancing drugs. They were injecting themselves with steroids that made them bigger and stronger and faster.
So they were cheating. These fellas are cheating. Why? I'll tell you, that's not the way to go in my ballpark, not my game. I used to go out drinking. Of course, I'd have a nice time for myself. I tried to get that Garrett to go with me. He never did. That's why we weren't so much friends. But anyway, I tried to go out and had a nice time. I had filled the as I said before, the bathtub with some champagne and ice, and we had a nice old time.
So if anything, your performance wasn't enhanced; it was probably diminished by your off-field
If I was
antics.
playing today, I'll tell you, I'd hit 100. I got news for you. I would hit 100.
100 home runs.
There's no doubt. But be that as it may, I'm not a big fan of these guys. Listen, what can I tell you? You got to throw those records out, boys. You got to throw those records out. You want to revert back to the Roger Maris and Hank Aaron? Feel free. But these guys with the steroids, I'm out.
Okay, that's what I figured you'd say. I didn't think you'd be that
fair and fair alike. What do you
say? I agree 100%. Well, we have a few more seconds here, so babe, why don't you tell me you don't know a lot about today's game, so talk about the game back when you were playing. What was your favorite part? What made you get up and go to the ballpark every day?
I would love to get to the ballpark. I get to the ballpark of a nice hot dog. These hot dogs, I don't know if you realize, in a doubleheaders, we'd have a nice doubleheader. I'd go out there and say there were some good dogs in the stands. I'd go have myself. I don't know if you've seen the record. We're talking about records. I had 12 hot dogs and 8 glasses of soda or bottles of soda in between doubleheader games.
Wow!
This is what it was all about. All right, we'll be back. I think you looked like
taking over the show. No, go for it, man. You're the home run king.
How about this?
Take me out with the
He knows how to produce a radio show.
me some peanuts and crack.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Suppose you walk into a baseball field. What teams are playing?
I don't know.
Then what are you doing in that baseball field?
I don't know. You got me in here, now get me out.
Look, what is the first thing you buy in a baseball field?
A hot dog.
A hot dog.
Without mustard?
Mustard goes with a hot dog.
Not with mine.
Mustard was made for the hot dog.
Now, but look, I don't like mustard.
Mustard and the hot dog go together.
Let them go together. I don't want to spoil any romance.
Do you know they spend millions of dollars every year to put up factories just to manufacture mustard? Do you know those factories employ thousands and thousands of men just to manufacture mustard? Do you know those men take care of thousands of families and homes, all on account of mustard? And you, just because you don't like mustard, what do you want them to do? Close those factories down and put all those people out of work?
Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. That's a classic.
That was a sketch we did. I remember now.
I should have ended that with our version of it. Like started with them and ended with that.
Yes.
Just thought of that now.
Edit that in later.
That's not a bad idea. Welcome to Everything Old is New Again. We're back. We had lost touch, unfortunately, with Babe Ruth. He kind of went back in time when we went to the commercial break. I don't know what was happening there. He was sort of controlling the...
listen, traveling East Coast to West Coast as a ball player is tough. time travel, I hear, is even tougher. So he had to be back to some other time period, and it was great to have him for the time we had him.
He was getting back to a World Series or something or other, whatever was happening there. But this fella, I'll tell you, he gave us a nice little insight onto his thinking of what's happening with baseball today.
Yeah.
I thought that was exciting. And I also want to then take a look back still now at the ballpark experience. We could talk a little Babe Ruth, but I want to talk about the ballpark experience and what it was like to go to a game, let's say in the 40s or 50s, Ebbets Field, Yankee Stadium, anywhere, St. Louis, ballparks, Washington. What was it like? Did you realize... I mean, now we have all these different foods, right? It's food courts everywhere. And, in fact, there are people that stay away from their seat for 2 innings getting a hamburger or getting lobster roll or whatever the heck is out there, right? And, again, we did a show like that years back. If you want to take a look at that, is the hot dog still king at the baseball stadium, one of our first shows. And it's on everythingoldisnewagain.biz, our website. But if you think about it, they didn't have a lot of refrigeration back then. It was mostly ice cubes, right? So the beer couldn't have been that cold.
True.
But it was comparing to the hot weather because there was no AC or what have you.
Right.
So now you've got hot dogs, peanuts, lemonade, right, and beer and Cracker Jacks. That's basically what you had at the ballpark.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a kick or not to you or is something... I don't mind that because I go to the game, I want to just sit down and watch the game.
Yeah.
Hot dogs and Cracker Jacks or, and a soda or lemonade, that's fine with me. Everybody needs to have all these different concoctions, But anyway, I don't know what your thought is on that.
I don't know where you're going with this. Okay. You're saying basically we don't need all the new fangled foods that are out there. You're good with the basics.
I guess what I'm saying is attendance is down a bit. Are they trying to promote the game by saying it's a restaurant and, by the way, there's a game going on?
Absolutely.
I mean, is that really something that's going to be successful, or shouldn't you be promoting the game?
Well, it's been like that for a while, though, with the variety of food, and that's absolutely catering to making the fan just more comfortable being at the stadium, giving them more options, getting them to come so it's not just... those days are gone, I hate to say it, where people are not going to the game because they also enjoy a good hot dog. They're going to the game because, there's some cool vendors, food vendors there they want to experience. That they're not going to sit there for all 9 innings. They're going to get up, and they want some other diversion, unfortunately, other than just sitting there like I'm sure you would like to, just watching the game.
Right.
I don't think that's a big thing anymore.
All right, well, I mean, that's
my opinion, and I think that's why they do it.
How about when you go to the stadium... And to me, one of the first things that hits you are the people they still do this, trying to sell you the yearbook and a scorecard. When's the last time you bought a scorecard?
I know, right? I occasionally see people using it, keeping score.
Think about when you would go to the ballpark. Think about Fenway, okay, where there's very little of the electronics going on. And I think in Chicago it's the same thing with Wrigley, right? The only 2 fields that you can really harken back. Although they've added some of these screens there. But think about it. You would see a couple of numbers for hits, and errors, and you'd see the score for the inning. That's it. You wouldn't even see, I don't think, maybe you did see the number of the player. Yeah, the player's number and the balls and strikes would be changed, I guess.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
No other stats. Not, this is pitch number 72, of this pitcher or whatever. I know what the pitch is and how fast it's going on. So you had to keep score yourself. You wouldn't see on the scoreboard that this guy went 2 for 3 for the day. And he's up for the 4th time in the 9th inning. Or
so you're saying it was like out of necessity?
Necessity, and I think, to me, I still kind of do it myself once in a while. It's fun. They actually have a new app now where you can keep score at the ball game.
Oh, really?
On your phone.
On your phone.
Which I think is pretty smart because I don't know that people are buying the scorecards anymore. But if you go to eBay, you can see people that kept score. They have let's make it up. The 1955 World Series where the Dodgers beat the Yankees, and the scorecard is there, and they're selling their grandfather's scorecard. For $100 or something like that.
I think that's another reason people did it back then, because it was, in addition to having the ticket to the game, it was another memento from the game, so that they can go back. And I remember, I have a friend of mine that to this day, he goes to a lot of games and he keeps score at every game. And when you go to his house, he can pull out, Yeah, here's when the Yankees Game 2, the 1977 World Series. He pulls it out, and he goes back and he relives the game through the scorebook.
See, now to me that makes a ton of sense. That's a light bulb in a way. Because I've been to so many games. I was lucky enough to have season tickets for the Yankees from '96 to 2004. What a great run! And I have memories, but I don't have memories like that. And I would say to you in school, if you're watching something and taking notes at the same time, you're watching your professor or whatever, and you're taking notes, you're going to remember that more than just watching.
Oh, sure.
So I think, that's an interesting idea where he would write a mark down or make a mistake and cross it out or whatever it might be that brought to him a memory of being at that game in '97.
And remembering the details of what happened and how they won and who got the hit.
Because you're involved. You're part of it now.
Right.
It's really interesting. I think it's a lost art, and if you want to stay at your seat and enjoy a baseball game and not be running around to the concessions all the time, it's a fun thing to do, to even teach your kids how to mark a K down for a strikeout, whether it was a swinging strike or a called strike. And I know this is very particular, but I don't think people want to do that too much anymore.
I don't think they do, because sometimes it's just accessible. You don't have to do it yourself. But I think I think we're gonna talk about or maybe we didn't really get to about why baseball is losing its popularity.
Yes, I just want to one more thing as to what it used to be like, and then let's talk about why. You would besides being hit with the concession for the scorecard, you'd be hit with this back in the day. I don't know if you remember this. All right, so we'll talk over it. It's the organ. That's the only music there was.
Oh,
and it was only in between innings.
Right.
And you didn't have somebody telling you when to clap. And you didn't have anybody, telling you, screaming in your ear, balls and strikes or who's coming up to bat. They didn't even announce players too much then.
It's true.
So it was a real ballpark. It was a park.
So here's my theory on baseball and why it's losing popularity. It used to represent the pace of life and a good escape for people to escape reality, but keep it didn't have a clock, so it moved in real time like you were living your life. Today, that's not how people live their lives anymore, unfortunately. With the multiple screens and the instant data and the social media, people are they can't focus on one thing for too long.
Yeah.
Baseball does not reflect how life is lived anymore, and I think that's why it's losing popularity. I just summed up probably a very long conversation in 30 seconds.
Well, that, and I also think the time of the game, all those coming back down, it used to be, come on, Tom said we would pitch a game. I remember looking at the box scores, 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Right.
And he'd complete the game. He'd have one guy come in for one inning, Tug McGraw or whatever, would come in for one inning to finish it off.
And finish, the Fireman of the Year. Remember that award?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's too much. There's too many, I'm sorry, there's too many interruptions, looking at somebody waiting, pulling out of the batter's box, fixing their gloves and all that. There's too many interruptions with visits to the mound, which they now have tried to limit. They charge you certain mound visits, you have a limitation. There's too many pitching changes. Each pitching change is 15 minutes. You've got 4 to 5 pitches a game. That's an hour to an hour and 15 waiting for somebody to pitch the ball for real. I mean, am I wrong? It's too much of that.
I agree.
And I know as an old timer, but I don't want to see 7, 6, 5 pitchers a game. I don't want to see someone say that this was a quality start when the guy went 6 innings and gave up 3 runs. That's a 4.5 ERA. That's not quality to me. I'm sorry. Does that make sense? I don't want to see a shutout, but the shutout was pitched by 4 guys. I don't want to see a guy pitching a no-hitter that's happened this year and got taken out in the 7th inning because he's throwing too many pitches. You tell me.
No, it's a different game. It's a completely different game right now.
And all of that's taken away. And the final thing is, where are the afternoon games? Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, we will watch a national game. It's like Sunday night at 8 now.
It was 30 years ago.
I know,
It's
because
been a long time.
there are no kids watching baseball because you're not making it accessible to kids to watch baseball.
Exactly.
You're putting it on at nighttime. Stop. Weekends are for baseball during the day, people. Everything old is new again. Go ahead, David.
I just wish Babe Ruth was back. He was much more calmer.
He was a happier fellow, wasn't he?
He was.
We'll be back next week. Everything old is new again. To know more fun with pop culture.